When companies start out, they look like this. But when they scale, they don't look like this. They look like this. Hi, my name's John Cipher, and I've owned companies all my working life. The one that made me the most money, I lived 1,500 miles away from and worked at part-time. How did I do that? By using CEO time. In this video, I'll share my approach, and maybe it'll help you too. So strap in and let's get started. We've all heard we should be working on our business and not in it. That's the essence of CEO time. But here's the thing. Unless your company is really big, you have to do both. More importantly, most people don't know what actions to take when it's time to work on their business. Suppose I said you should stop working in your business next Thursday at 1 o'clock and spend the rest of the day working on it. Do you know what you'd do differently? Most people don't have a plan for that. In this video, I'll share with you how I did it so you can do it too. Let's revisit the analogy to music. This guy plays all the notes. But these people, each of these people, plays just some of the notes. And it's probably safe to say they play them better than the one-man band. But there's one guy in this picture who plays none of the notes. That's the conductor. The conductor of an orchestra is the only person on stage not making any of the music that the audience comes to hear. Likewise, a CEO doesn't directly produce any of the value that customers pay for. But wait, I hear you saying, I'm the CEO and I personally make a lot of product and do a lot of selling and all sorts of other stuff directly myself. I know. I used to do that too. Let's unpack it. You see, your job may be CEO, but you do other things as well. I find it useful to think of all the things you do as functions, not jobs. That's because when you perform lots of functions, you feel like this. The power comes in distinguishing what all those hats or functions really do, so you can isolate the ones that truly belong to the CEO. What do I mean by a function? Well, a function is something that produces an output. That's why you spend the time and the money getting it done. Every function has 4 parts. Let's look at the payroll function to show you what I mean. The trigger is whatever day you do payroll, every other Tuesday or whatever. The input is the hours and salaries of everybody for that period. The transformation is the calculations for deductions and things that the payroll company does. And then the output, this is the reason you do payroll, the output is money going to people's bank accounts and reports going to management and forms to the tax authorities. For other functions, the trigger's different. Sometimes it's a customer placing an order, or it could be an inventory level getting to a certain point, or something else entirely. As your company grows, some outputs of one function become inputs to another. For example, when you're small, the entire sales process is often a single function done by one person, and the output is a customer making a purchase. But for larger organizations, one person or even a group can generate leads. Their output is a qualified lead. That's the input to another person or group who's closing the deal. Their output is a signed contract or deposit from the customer. So you can think of your whole company as a collection of functions. Now, what about the CEO function? What the CEO and the conductor both do is coordinate all the work that everybody else does. And there's only 3 basic outcomes that a company needs to do to survive. First, it has to make something people want to buy. Then it has to find those people and sell to them. And it has to build an organization to support the making and the selling. That's doing things like collecting the money, paying the bills, keeping the lights on, hiring, training, managing, etc. As you've probably guessed by now, each of these are all functions, and they all contain many sub-functions. Here's what the first level of sub-functions looks like. Each has an output that contributes to the higher function, and as companies scale, they contain even more levels. The full expansion starts to look overwhelming, but don't worry. This level of detail is overkill for all but the largest companies. The trick at the CEO level is to balance the output of all these functions and add sub-functions appropriately as you scale. Like the one-man band, he was actually playing all the notes needed to carry the tune. And that iconic startup you hear about with 2 guys in a co-working space, between them they perform all the functions needed for that stage of the company. If your business is alive, most of these functions are probably doing okay, at least for now. But if you're frustrated with how it's going, or if you want to scale, you'll have to improve on some of the functions. Here's the key to scaling your company. All these functions, except for the ones around your product or service, are very similar across all industries, and they all scale in a predictable way. This is something I've learned in 40 years of running my own companies and 25 of working with hundreds of CEOs across the U.S. and in Europe. When I was running my company from 1,500 miles away, I designed most of the functions to empower other people to perform them. The ones I kept to myself were the CEO functions. And at the scale of my company at that stage, it wasn't a full-time job. And so now I have to tell you, I may have misled you a moment ago. Remember when I said there were only 3 things a company needs to do to survive? That's true. But most of us don't want our companies only to survive. We want them to thrive. And there's a 4th thing needed for a company to thrive, and that's clearly part of the CEO function. You see, the orchestra conductor coordinates all the musicians so their output aligns with the score that the composer wrote. Well, what's the score of a company? The CEO coordinates the makers, sellers, and supporters to align with their vision of what the company can be. And vision is not something vague or touchy-feely. It's actually a function that produces an outcome. And like all the other functions, it breaks down into sub-functions like this. When you add in the vision, the full expansion looks like this. But remember, these scale in a predictable way. CEO time is not finding that elusive 13th hour in the day. It's working on your business by coordinating people's work so all the functions are balanced. What I mean by that is, you don't want to make stuff you don't have the capacity to sell, nor do you want to sell stuff you can't make. That's balance. And CEO time is developing proper sub-functions in your company and then empowering your people to grow to be the best that they can be. You do that by considering every function and its output and by managing and leading. I've developed tools and exercises to help my clients improve and scale many of these functions. Here's an example of one I did on training. But I want to ask you a question now. Why is CEO time like this so uncommon? Well, there's actually 2 reasons. One, it's not urgent, and we tend to get overwhelmed by urgent things. And 2, there's no training about how to be a CEO of a small or medium-sized companies that focuses on these functions. Living away from my company as I did and my work with other business owners has taught me how to deal with both these problems. To deal with the lack of urgency, the short answer is you just have to grab CEO time and make it a priority. I have another video that goes into that in more detail. You can click on it up here. The training that we need as CEOs teaches us to be less intuitive and more procedural. You'll learn to determine the proper sub-functions your company needs and to improve each of its 4 parts. You can even learn to build an org chart of your whole company based on functions rather than people. I'm putting some of these tools and exercises that I mentioned on my YouTube channel for free, youtube.com/CEO Bootcamp. And remember, the point of CEO time is to coordinate the functions in your company so you can do a better job of serving customers. Remember, customers? They are the ones that pay you for something they actually value more than their money. But in my experience working with business owners, it's not just the money that drives us. There's usually a bigger vision that encompasses the reason that you're in this business at this particular time of your life. CEO time will help you make that vision a reality. And those reasons, why are you in business at this time in your life? Well, that's a video for another day. If you'd like more customized help than you can get from these videos, I may have an opening to take on another client or 2, depending on my schedule at the time you're watching this. If that's of interest to you, check out my website, and if you're still interested, shoot me an email with some details about your company and we'll set up a time to chat. There's no promises that I can help, but we won't know until we talk. If you got something out of this video, please like, share, and subscribe.